You have stood on a dock at 7 in the morning and thought about it. The water is flat, halyards are ticking against masts. Somewhere down the row a diesel engine turns over and a man in a fleece walks past you with 2 coffees, and you think the thought everybody thinks, someone owns this. It looks like the best business in the world. People pay you rent to leave their toys in your water. They pay you again for the fuel. They pay you a third time when something breaks. The asset appreciates. The waterfront is finite. Nobody is building new marinas. Here is the part nobody tells you. In most coastal states, you cannot buy the water. You will never own it. You will lease it from the state, and the state will take its cut of your revenue before your lender takes theirs, before your payroll clears, and long before you take anything at all. Start with the ticket price. Marinas are priced the way commercial real estate is priced. You take the net operating income, you divide by a capitalization rate, and that is the number. In today's market, marina cap rates run roughly 6 to 10%. Well-located coastal facilities with a waitlist and strong fuel and service revenue trade at the low end, 6 to 7. Secondary markets and value-add properties trade at 8 to 10. Appraisers also use a simpler yardstick, price per slip. A basic facility without a boatyard, a restaurant, or a dealership is often modeled around $50,000 per slip. So a 100-slip marina, unremarkable, no frills, is a $5 million asset before you have negotiated anything. You are not paying that in cash. You are financing it, and here is your first problem, one that shows up before you have signed anything. The large institutional lenders mostly do not lend on marinas. It is a specialty asset with environmental liability attached to it, and it does not fit a standard commercial underwriting box. So you are borrowing from a regional bank or a specialty finance company, and they want 25 to 35% down. On a $5 million marina, that is roughly $1.25 to $1.75 million of your own money wired. Gone. Then the diligence begins. Before that loan funds, you will order a Phase 1 environmental site assessment, because you are buying a property where boats have been fueled, painted, and scraped for 60 years. You will commission a bathymetric survey to find out how deep your own basin actually is. You will pull 3 years of financials, a rent roll, and every permit the property holds. And you will read the lease. Because there is one. This is the cost nobody Googles. In Florida, the submerged land under your docks belongs to the Board of Trustees of the Internal Improvement Trust Fund and is administered by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. You occupy it under a sovereignty submerged lands lease. Standard term is 10 years if at least 90% of your slips are open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis. Otherwise, 5. The fee structure is the part that should stop you cold. Under Rule 18 to 21.011 of the Florida Administrative Code, you pay an annual per square foot lease fee or 6% of the gross revenue generated on state-owned property, whichever is greater. Read that again, not 6% of profit, 6% of gross. The base square footage rate was set at just over 14 cents per square foot back in 2007 and has been adjusted upward every March since, indexed to consumer prices, capped at 10% a year. There are discounts. 30% off if you are genuinely open to the public first come, first served. 10% if you qualify for the state's Clean Marina program. Take both and the state is still ahead of you in line. Florida is not unusual. Maine runs its own submerged lands leasing program through the Bureau of Parks and Lands, and it too calculates marina rent as a percentage of slip income. The specific numbers change state to state. The structure does not. You are a tenant on the water, and the landlord is the public. Now zoom all the way in to 1 slip, 1 boat, 1 month. Almost every marina in the country prices by length overall. A national baseline in 2026 runs roughly $15 to $35 per foot per month. Premium markets, Southern California, Miami, Newport Beach, run $50 to $100 a foot and up. Take a 32-foot boat at $22 a foot. That is $704 a month. Call it $8,000 a year, and remember that in most of the country, you are only collecting for a 7-month season. Against that, the industry benchmark for a marina's operating expense ratio is about 60%. Payroll, insurance, utilities, dock maintenance, Dredging reserves, management. 60 cents of every dollar that boat owner hands you is spent before it reaches your net operating income line. So on that $700 slip, you are keeping about $280 a month at the NOI line. Then the state's 6% comes out. Then the mortgage. What about fuel? Everyone assumes the fuel dock is where the money is, because marina fuel is famously 50 to 100% more expensive than the pump down the road. The gross markup is real, somewhere between 50 cents and $1.50 a gallon over wholesale. But that is gross. Out of it comes the dockhand standing there all day, whether anyone pulls up or not. The credit card processing on a $900 fill, the insurance premium on underground fuel tanks sitting 15 feet from open water, and the compliance regime that comes with storing thousands of gallons of gasoline at the waterline. Operators will tell you the true overhead lands somewhere in the 10 to 20 cents a gallon range at high volume, and considerably worse at low volume. Which is why the industry rule of thumb is that it is better to make 10 cents on 1,000 gallons than 50 cents on 10. The yard is the same story from a different angle. Boatyard labor bills at $90 to $125 an hour. That is the customer-facing rate. It is not margin. It is a marine mechanic's wage, his benefits, his workers' compensation premium in one of the more dangerous trades in the country. The travel lift, the lift's annual inspection, and the yard's stormwater compliance. Now the fixed cost trap, which in this business is unusually cruel. Your marina is a saltwater immersed steel and concrete structure that is corroding every single day of the year, including the 5 months nobody is boating. Pilings, floating dock systems, power pedestals, seawalls. A seawall alone runs $400 to $800 per linear foot to replace. Floating dock systems run tens of dollars per square foot. These are not repairs. These are 7-figure capital events that arrive on a schedule you do not control. And underneath all of it, the water is filling in. Sediment accumulates in every basin. NOAA describes dredging as the removal of accumulated sediment to maintain navigable depth. And for a marina, it is not optional maintenance. It is existential. A boat that cannot get in at low tide is a slip you cannot rent. Dredging runs roughly $20 to $50 per cubic yard in ordinary conditions, and in Florida the range quoted for marina work stretches from $20 to $300 a cubic yard depending on site conditions and contamination. A modest 4-acre basin needing 10,000 cubic yards removed is a several $100,000 project on the low end. If the sediment tests contaminated, disposal alone can run $80 to $125 a yard at a certified landfill, and the number goes vertical. And you cannot just do it. You need permits, potentially from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, your state environmental agency, and your coastal zone management program. Operators routinely describe permitting timelines in years. Insurance is the other line moving against you. In the 2025 industry survey, published by Marina Dock Age, 73% of operators reported insurance costs rising, the single most cited source of budget pressure. 69% reported rising maintenance and renovation costs. 67% reported rising payroll. Here is the structural fact that reframes the entire business. The slips are not the business. The slips are the customer acquisition mechanism. Slip income is stable, low labor, and low margin, and it is the reason appraisers value it at a lower cap rate than anything else on the property. But it is not what generates cash. Fuel, boatyard service, winter storage, retail, and food service can contribute up to about 30% of total marina revenue, and they carry the operating leverage. This is why the top-performing coastal marinas generate $5,000 to $15,000 per slip per year across all revenue lines, when the slip rent alone might only account for $3,000 or $4,000 of it. A marina that only rents slips is a parking lot with a corrosion problem and a government landlord. A marina with a haul-out yard, a fuel dock, and heated winter storage is an actual business that happens to have parking attached. So what does survival actually look like? Lenders underwrite marinas to a debt service coverage ratio of about 1.25. That means your net operating income has to be 25% larger than your annual mortgage payment every year, or you are in technical default. Work the appraisal math. A marina carrying roughly $243,000 of annual debt service needs about $290,000 of net operating income to satisfy that covenant. At a 60% expense ratio, that requires about $486,000 of effective gross income. And the appraisal model that produces those numbers assumes 95% occupancy. 95%. Not 80. Not 85. Which means your practical break-even sits somewhere in the high 80s to low 90s. And everything above that line, the last 8 or 10 boats, is your entire profit. And in that worked example, after debt service, the operator is left with under $50,000 of pre-tax cash flow on a multi-million-dollar asset. There is no marina-specific failure statistic published by any federal agency, and anyone who quotes you, one is making it up. What the Bureau of Labor Statistics does show is that roughly half of all new American businesses do not survive 5 years. But marinas rarely fail by closing. Waterfront does not go dark, it changes hands. Which brings you to who actually wins. The state wins first. Its 6% comes off gross, in good years and bad. Whether you dredged, whether you had a hurricane, whether you made $1. The lender wins second, at a coverage ratio it set, on terms it dictated because almost nobody else will write the paper. And then there is the third party, the one that has quietly reshaped this entire industry. Safe Harbor Marinas, owned by Sun Communities, holds more than 130 properties. Suntex holds more than 50. Private equity-backed platforms are consolidating behind them. They target facilities with 200 or more slips. They pay premiums for strategic locations. And what they are really buying is not your docks. It is your permits and your ground position, because getting a new marina entitled and built in the United States is now so difficult that replacement cost puts a floor under every existing one. You will spend 15 years fighting sediment and insurance renewals to build a stabilized operating history. And the thing that history is worth most to is a balance sheet in Dallas that will buy it from you at a 6 cap. So who does this actually work for? It works for the operator who already owns marine trades. If you run a boatyard, a dealership, or a service company, a marina is a captive customer base, and the economics invert in your favor. It works for the buyer with real equity, low leverage, and a 15-year horizon, because appreciation on irreplaceable waterfront is the actual return, not the operating income. It works for the consolidator with cost of capital you cannot match. It destroys the buyer who put $1.5 million down, borrowed the rest, modeled 95% occupancy, and did not budget for a dredge. Because that person did not buy a marina, you have stood on a dock at 7 in the morning and thought, someone owns this. And somebody does. It just isn't the person in the fleece carrying the coffees. It's the state that owns the water, the bank that owns the paper, and the fund that will own the whole thing in 9 years. And every one of them gets paid before the water is even yours to rent.